Silver bells, silver bells, it's Christmas time in the city. There's food ring-a-ling, hear them ring, soon it will be Christmas Day. Strings of streetlights, even stoplights, sprinkle white, red, and green as the shoppers rush home with their treasures. Hear the snow crunch, see the kids bunch. This is Santa's big scene, and above all this bustle, you'll hear Merry Christmas.
Good morning, everyone. I am Reverend Scharmer, and it is my absolute delight to be here today, celebrating our Christmas together. This is actually the morning of the eve of Christmas Eve, right? There we go. I knew I could get that together. So we're given themes each month by our home office, and the theme for the month of December, you heard Elliot talk about, was happiness and forgiveness. But since it's December 23rd, I kind of deviated from that each minister has that ability to do. And I saw an article years and years ago by Ernest Holmes, our founder, written in the Science of Mind magazine, that is the true meaning of Christmas. He wrote it in 1955. So I'm going to be giving you bits and pieces of that article, kind of interwoven with the rest of the talk this morning, and then head straight over to our candle lighting. Because that's what I think a lot of people are here for, is just that deep, deep feeling that comes from lighting a candle and feeling your own light. Because that's what that symbolism is when we light that candle. We see the light inside ourselves. Now, Ernest Holmes, when he's writing this article, he talks about the very first part of the article. The thoughts and ideas of Christmas come down to us from some of the great root religions of ancient civilizations. We heard Greg talk about that. What we're celebrating now has been celebrated from time eternal. This is, a lot of people called it pagan. It was the ancient cultures. It was the following the cycles of the world. That as our longest day in June starts to gradually get darker and darker and darker until the darkest, shortest day occurs on December 21st, and then it starts lightening again. So we're celebrating the light. And what Ernest Holmes is talking about this with the great root religions is the virgin birth that is part of the Christian story that goes with the Immaculate Conception, the virgin birth, and those things which we tie into traditional theology are also as old as time. And they stand for the concept of the originating creative principle of power, God, the Word of God, operating in and through all things. This was called the Spirit of God, operating upon the soul of God, also known as the Father-Mother-God principle. And Unity is very big on Father-Mother-God. All of their opening statements are all about recognizing that Father-Mother-God, the power impregnating the soul with the creative energy that takes form in our world. It's just a beautiful concept. Ernest Holmes talks about the seed, the soil, and the flower. So that whole trinity exists everywhere. The virgin birth is also an interesting concept. When I was doing some research on this, I found out that there were over 30 instances of virgin or miraculous birth. I did not know that. Did anybody know there was that much? The sun god Ra, virgin birth of, Egyptian god Ra, born of a virgin mother Net. Aztec legend talks about an ambassador was sent from heaven on an embassy to the Virgin of Tulan called Chimalmayan, announcing that it was the will of God that she should conceive a son. And having delivered the message, he left the house and she delivered a son. Miracle births. Now there's stories, right? This is all mythology, but they have meaning for it. In Tahiti, the goddess Hina is believed to have conceived by passing under the shadow of a leaf, which the god shook. Interesting stories in it. Different belief systems exist in different ways to be able to talk about this virgin birth, which is the birth of pure thought. The absolute, unsullied, total perfection, complete wholeness. The virgin goddess Isis gave birth to the child Horus. Native American traditions have a story of a disobedient virgin who gives birth by magical impregnation to a being who at an early age developed the characteristics of a miracle worker. Now, the one that I found most interesting was Buddha. There are stories of his mother, Maya, being a virgin, even though there are also stories of her being married to the king and Buddha being a prince. And as the story goes, is that the mother went through a purification ritual, and in doing this became like a virgin, at which point she then gave birth to the Buddha. The purity, the cleansing, the fact that there is a part inside each and every one of us that knows no wrong, that knows no pain, that is the divine consciousness, the Christ consciousness. And we use that word in New Thought a lot, Christ consciousness. And you ask 10 people, you're going to get 10 different meanings. You know, some people think that it's, well, when you're enlightened, you have the Christ consciousness. That Jesus was known to have the Christ consciousness. When I looked it up, there was at least 4 or 5 different meanings. The one that I liked best, let's see if I can find it here in my notes, came from Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce, as many of you know, was deep into the mystical elements of life, a lot doing with the psychic ability. And he said that the Christ consciousness is the awareness within each soul, imprinted in pattern on the mind, waiting to be awakened of the soul's oneness with God. That's the Christ consciousness. That's the opening that each and every one of us can do to ourselves, to who we are, to that inner light. Now, when we're doing the miracle birth and the virgin birth, that symbolized somebody special was coming into the world. Jesus definitely qualifies for that. The great teacher, the great prophet, the Son of God, as each and every one of us is a child of God. This is what Jesus' message was all about, is that all these things you too can do. When we look at these mythological stories too, we don't really know what's true and what isn't, what's symbolism and what's historical fact. I mean, I think back, I happened to be born on New Year's Day. So I was 5 years old before I realized that the whole world didn't set off fireworks for me. Why not? My parents told me they did. Of course I'm going to believe that. And as I'm writing this, I said, you know, how many other things do we just naturally believe and we never question it, like a 5-year-old, because it's just part of our life. So when we look at all these myths, I like to take them at the symbolic level. There's a light that exists that is being represented by the being born in absolute purity. And the Christ consciousness that exists inside us is the eternal birth. There's a title for today's talk, is that eternal birth, because it goes on and on and on. This is what immortality is about. This is what eternality is about. Master Eckhart talks about God never had but one child. That child is forever. That child is eternal, always begetting the only begotten. We are all that one child of God. We are all deeply connected at that Christ consciousness level. We know from the life of Jesus that this Christ consciousness is that expansion of the mind and the connection at a deeper, deeper level. When Jesus came into this world, I love it, Ernest was talking about, not when he was born, it was when he was incarnated. So when he was incarnated into this world, he took the laws of Moses and he brought them personal. Moses came out and talked about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. There's going to be justice in this world. And Moses goes up to the mountain and he comes down with the 10 Commandments. Well, if you'll also look around in different traditions, so many stories of going to the mountain, going to your higher place, going to where you are elevated from what comes up in the day-to-day world. So Moses went to the higher place. And when he came back down, he had the laws that then were part of the Jewish tradition for years. Jesus came and looked at those same laws and brought them personal. Jesus didn't come in with an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. He said, whatever you soweth, so shall you reap. It's personal. It's not just a impersonal law that says this happens. It happens to me. Ernest talks in the article, let me read a little bit of this because it was just so beautiful. Moses taught the great law of cause and effect, justice. Jesus came and said, I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. What did he teach? The relationship of the individual to the universal. We find Jesus, without departing from Moses' justice, teaching that whatsoever a man soweth, so shall he reap. This is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but with the personal element in it. There is warmth. There is color. God is not a principle. God is a presence. This is the great revelation. God is personal to me, and I am the child of God. He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. We find Jesus representing that total warmth and color. Now, when Moses went up into the mountains to get the 10 Commandments, there's always the great prophets that are going up beyond to where anybody else has ever been. And then they bring their vision down to the lower levels for the human perspective. Because most people don't go to the mountaintop. And yet everyone has intuition. And that intuition is our own Christ consciousness talking to us when we just know. There's another symbolism in the story of Jesus, is the 3 wise men that follow the star of the east to find the child in the cradle. The 3 wise men followed the light which must finally overcome the darkness. The men of great intellect, men of high estate, followed intuition, the star which led them across the desert and the waste places of life to where the little child lay. This implies, according to Ernest, that knowledge without wisdom is no good. And this is what we're learning today. Knowledge alone is not enough. The Magi knew this. And what we are coming to know and what Jesus taught, you have to become like a little child to get into the kingdom of heaven. This is the little child that will just laugh with delight on a windy day because their hair is blowing, who will just squeal because their birthday cake is in front of them on their birthday. Be like the little children. Be that innocent, that joy-filled. And that is a symbol also of that Christ consciousness. We're not weighted down with the trials and tribulations of a human condition. We're finding the light within, and we're letting it lift us higher. Lighting one candle in a dark room brightens the entire room. And when a second candle is lit off that first candle, it does not diminish the light of that first candle, does it? We have a duty in this world today to take the light of us, our inner consciousness, out into the world. In so many different ways, we can take the Christ consciousness as love, as light, as hope, as beauty. When we're doing a candle lighting, this is what we'll be looking at, is what word resonates with you. When you have the Christ consciousness in your own mind coming to the forefront and showing up in this world, how is it showing up? Is it joy? Is it beauty? Is it love? And it's all these things. But at this moment, right here, right now, what one word comes to you? Ernest looks at Christmas as the most glorious tradition on the face of the earth. I'm quoting from his article. The greatest idea of profound simplicity ever uttered by the mind of man. The sweetest story ever told. But it is up to us to bring it to earth. What good to sing praises to a heavenly host? What good to look back 2,000 years ago and watch a divine event of the incarnation of light and love, of wisdom, truth, beauty, majesty, power, and might? What good unless right now Christ is born in us today? This is our prayer. As we lift our heart and soul and mind to the glory of that which is, may the inspiration of the infinite Spirit within us make us aware of our eternal birth forever taking place. All the great works and wonders that God has ever wrought, even God himself with all his goodness, can never make me blessed, only as far as they exist and are done and are loved, known, tasted, and felt within me is where Christ consciousness lies. It's a big concept. It's a very big concept. And what it does is it gives us the power to own our lives, to create our own reality, to take whatever has happened in our past and move it forward. Move it into the Christ consciousness that lifts our hearts, lifts our minds, expands our ability to live in this world. Big stuff. Big stuff. So we're going to move with that idea, that Christ consciousness, into our candle lighting ceremony. Does everyone have a candle? And the ushers can go ahead and bring out more candles for those of you who do not. You'd raise your hand if you need a candle. And what our process is going to be is I will first light our Christ consciousness candle. You'll see many churches keep a single candle burning at all times. We actually, because we're in a different type of environment, do not have that happen. But today being special, We get to look at this candle, this eternal flame, and know that it just burns bright inside each of us. Carmina, could I ask you to turn out the lights? And what we're going to be doing, if I'll get the ushers to help do some direction, we're going to come down the middle row, middle aisle, with your candle, light it from the Christ consciousness, and at that moment speak the word of light that you are taking into the world. You'll then come over and Greg will be manning our holding space for our candles, and you will plant the candle as far back as you can, because obviously if you plant it in the front, the next person is, oh, ow, eek. So you'll put it, and Greg will help with getting it aligned and making sure that it doesn't fall down, and make sure that all happens. So let's just take a moment to go within and feel that Christ consciousness. Know that there is something eternal being birthed within you right here and right now. This is the divine perfection that is you. And find that word today of what represents your inner light that you are taking out to the world. And hold that word close to your heart. We'll have soft music playing as we start our candle lighting. And if the front row could come forward. Your prayer is my prayer too. Light of joy exists inside. The light of forgiveness.
sing hallelujah.
Surrender lets your light shine
Christ, the Savior is born.
The light of faith and compassion shines
Christ, the
strong
Savior is born.
What is your word?
Silent
Connection.
night,
The light of connection shines strong within
night, Son of God, love's pure
the
light,
light of compassion and the light of joy shines
radiant
strong within you.
beams from thy holy face.
And what is your word?
With the dawn
The light of
of
trust shines deep within you.
redeeming grace. Jesus, Lord, at thy birth,
The light of oneness shines deep
Jesus,
within you.
Lord, at thy
And what is your word? Open-hearted. The light of open-heartedness shines strong within you.
Round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly peace.
Let us pray. There's one mind, one spirit, one divine essence at work in this entire world. It's this thing called life, called light, called love, peace, joy, wisdom. So many words used by so many beliefs. The prophets, Jesus, Mohammed, Krishna, Buddha, all had the light within them, the Christ consciousness, shining strong. Each and every person in this room has that same Christ consciousness. We are all a choice of what we do with it. The words that we have spoken today, so beautifully represented by our candles, drives us forward. We know the words that work for us. We know the image that we put into this world that is our Christ consciousness. The one light completely lightens a darkened room. I declare the truth for the people in this room that they are lighting their world, taking their Christ consciousness to new levels. As a gratitude fills my heart for the teachings, for this day, for this season, for the people here in this room and in this world that I feel connected to, I give thanks. I let go of this prayer, I let go of these words, I let go of this sentiment into the world that I live in, knowing that every word spoken today is already manifest in the mind of God. I invite all of you to help me anchor what we have done here today by saying with me, and so it is.